Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another astrology video. This happens to be my 200th video here on YouTube. In my previous video, I made mention of that, and I said I wanted to do something a little bit different for the big 200th. What I didn't realize at that time was how close I was to 4,000 subscribers, which I have now passed that mark. I don't really notice the analytics of things too much, but thank you so much. It was nice to get that notification. And so thank you for being here, whether you're a new subscriber or an old one. I hope that these videos are helping you in some way, shape, or form. In this video, I want to do something a little different. And it's also not only about 200 videos and 4,000 subscribers and a Jupiter return for me, but Pluto in Aquarius as well. Obviously, it is coming up. It's 1st of November when I'm recording this. So we've got just the fraction over 2 weeks, and we're going to be in Pluto and Aquarius territory for the next 20 years. I've been doing astrology for 20 years, and so now I'm looking at Pluto and Aquarius, and which is my ninth house, and obviously that's one of the houses of astrology. And what do I personally want to bring to the astrological table over the next 2 decades? And at this point in time, what I really want to do is bring the humane or the human Aquarius back into the astrology. Um, Yes, there's going to be AI. Yes, there's going to be technological advances that we can't even imagine at this point in time. However, one thing that is going to ultimately always be true is that humans are always going to want to know the meaning, the purpose of their life, and some kind of framework or scaffolding to help understand the direction that we're headed in. And so that's one of the inspirations behind this video. On my own YouTube algorithm during the week, Jordan Peterson released a video of his psychological analysis of Donald Trump's personality. And I thought, wow, that's such a brilliant opportunity to examine, not only examine Donald Trump's chart, I mean, that's been done to death, but how can we take that psychological point of view and some of his statements that he's made about uh, what is it, DT, Donald Trump, and how we can see those statements in the astrology. So, how we can pick that out and help us grow our delineations and help us expand beyond, detriment and fall and all of these types of languages that we have in astrology. And yes, while they're important, I would also implore you to not be limited by those. So that's the purpose of this. If I was more of a fancier YouTuber, I would, well, I'm not a YouTuber, I just do astrology videos in between doing astrology work. Um, I would take clips of Jordan Peterson's statements and then refer to the astrology. I'm not a fancy video maker here. So I've got notes. I would invite you to watch that video. It's actually quite hilarious and very insightful as well. So let's do that. Let's get into it because I want to show you some features of Donald Trump's chart that you may not have come across before. I'm sure plenty of you have seen his chart before. I've even did a rough video on him when he back in July when Mars and Algol. Yeah, it was Mars, Uranus, and Algol conjoin the midheaven, which you're welcome to check out if you like. So his birth data is up the top there. He does have an A-rated chart, a double A-rated chart from an online copy of his birth certificate. So it's pretty on the money for all intents and purposes. So when people do look at his chart, they do tend to jump real quick into the fact that Mars is on the ascendant, which shows up very much in his assertiveness, his abrasiveness, and his capacity to divide and be, separative. And, plenty of people clutch their pearls just at his name. So, and then of course, the ruler of that ascendant is the sun. And the sun is there with the North Node and Uranus. And a Uranus is also a very separative and can be very abrasive and, outside of the status quo quality. But what I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time in this video on is looking at a planet that might otherwise be somewhat ignored in his birth chart, and that is Mercury in Cancer. There's going to be quite a few reasons, and we'll unravel those as we go. But there's a lot to be said about Mercury in Cancer as far as I'm concerned in his birth chart, and a couple of other key points as well. Now, to sort of go back to JP or Jordan Peterson, he spends about half an hour uh, with his psychological analysis of Donald Trump. So he talks about DJ, was it DT, all these JTs and DJs and JPs and stuff. He talks about obviously he's very, very assertive and extremely extroverted. And we can definitely sort of see that sun, shining bright in the 11th, Mars in the ascendant, on the ascendant there. But he also spends a fair amount of time talking about Donald Trump's level of openness. And that he is incredibly entrepreneurial, which of course, is obvious, but also to be a very successful entrepreneur in many different ways. And he uses descriptors such as plasticity, change, growth, and transformation. Not only is he multi-entrepreneurial, but also multi-successful. He's done things like here, just checking my notes, multiple enterprises, ghost written 19 books. I didn't know that, which is quite incredible. Obviously, very mega real estate construction business. Also a very significant celebrity for many decades at this point, a decade-long television career. Um, so there's a lot of irons in the fire, as we could say there. He also talks about his what was the descriptor, devastatingly and underappreciated sense of humor that's quite ruthless. So, we might sort of think, yeah, Mars on the ascendant, but I'm going to lean into Mercury in Cancer. So let's break this down from the astrological standpoint. Okay, so the ascendant, the ruler of the ascendant is the sun. So the sun is there with the North Node, Uranus, forming a full moon. So he's born on a lunar eclipse. But the sun and this stellium here of the node, which technically isn't a planet, we've got Uranus, are all looking to Gemini for their guidance, or looking to Mercury, I should say more specifically. Also keeping in mind that this stellium, which includes the ruler of his ascendant, is the most elevated in the chart. So in terms of visibility to the naked eye, we can't see Uranus, it's too far away. The North Node isn't something we can even see ever. So the sun is the leader of the pack as far as diurnal motion is concerned in the birth chart, which also happens to be the ruler of the ascendant. So that gives a whole level of potency to the sun just from the sheer what's the word, like astronomical phenomenon, so the physiological side of what's actually happening on the day of his birth. um Not to mention it's with the North Node, it's with Uranus, and all the other astrological components, of course, go without saying. So this sun, the ruler of the ascendant, is looking to Mercury for its guidance, for its P's and Q's, and how to behave in the world. Now, I'm going to introduce a topic that some of you may have heard of, some of you may not. I'm Australian. I probably say it different to how I've heard it said before. I say Phasis. I've heard other people say it like Phasis, a lot more perhaps fancy than my version, but I'm saying Phasis and I'm sticking to that. Anyhow, so Phasis in the birth chart. If this is unfamiliar to you and you want to investigate it, I do have a webinar on my website about it. It is hands down one of my favorite techniques to use if it applies to your birth chart. Obviously, it's still good to know if you are reading for clients and you want to investigate what Phasis is. In a nutshell, so we know that the general rule for visibility with planets is within 8 degrees of the sun under the beams, within 15 degrees of the sun, 8 degrees combust, within 15 it's under the beams. And so we can look at that in a stationary position with the birth chart, but the birth chart is a sky always in motion, right? So with the technique, we're looking at the day of the birth, 7 days either side of the day of the birth, so a week before, a week later, which would equate to a 15-degree distance. So if someone's Mercury moves into invisibility or out of invisibility as per this technique, they then qualify for this uh, condition known as phasis, which is what Donald Trump has, right? The day before he was born, Mercury got to that 15 degrees away from the sun and became visible. So it was emerging from the sun's rays after its superior conjunction with the sun. And so it made its superior conjunction. It's then therefore making its heliacal rise, and then it will eventually transition into, the retrograde with time. But it's very uh, uh, it's a heliacal rise. So it's rising, it's gaining strength, it's gaining power, it's gaining visibility. It's not going into the beams. If we are going into the beams, we're going into invisibility, into weakness, into a lack of power or strength. It's still potent, but it may not be quite the indomitable force of a Mercury that's becoming visible. Because keeping in mind that Mercury is such an invisible planet all of the time, it's a, it's only becomes visible the least out of all of the planets that we can see with the naked eye. So with Donald Trump, Mercury rules so much in his birth chart, and it's uh, creating this interesting dynamic known as phasis. It's said that when a planet, in this case Mercury, is in phasis or having this change of visibility, its significations become intensified, similarly to when we have a station retrograde. Obviously, a station retrograde, it's intensified, but into weakness. Station direct, it's intensified, but into recovery and strength. So in Donald Trump's case, this Mercury is moving towards strength. It's moving towards visibility, potency, and power, and is rising. Okay. It's Mercury. So if Mercury is in this condition with intensity and power and potency, we can expect Mercury significations to reflect as such. So it could be words. Given Donald Trump isn't the most eloquent of speakers, but his words are certainly potent, whether you like them or not. He's written, well, maybe not technically written, but had 19 books ghost written. That's quite mercurial. He would have done and continues to do endless amount of business dealings, phone calls, emails, and being on the campaign train at the moment. He runs a very, very intense schedule. So then, of course, that's speaking to Mercury just in of itself. It rules the 11th house. So the 11th house, the low-hanging fruit of that house is often described as, friends, networks, groups, and communities as well. But I also like to see the 11th house as a little bit more than that, because the 11th house in diurnal motion is the part of the sky that rises up to support the career. So we're going to have people who are fanning your flames, people who are supporting you, people who are part of your cheer squad. So we can see that as, for individuals like you and me, maybe it's our 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. I don't have a great 11th house, so I probably will never have a great YouTube channel, which, that's cool. I'm not here for that. I'm just here to try and share some helpful stuff. Um, but with JT, for example, is it JT, JD, DJ, DT, Donald Trump, all these initials that I tend to abbreviate. With Donald Trump, um, he's got 92 million followers on X. He's probably got at least, I'm assuming, say 50% of a very large country's support. Um, so, he definitely has potency and power with people. Um, whether those people are the high echelons of society and power, and then equal amount with people who are garbage truck drivers, for instance. So he can sort of relate to all of the levels. Again, very mercurial. Mercury as a planet will go into areas of the ecliptic that other planets don't get to. And then, of course, mythologically, Mercury moves into the heavens, into Earth, and of course, into the under realms as well. So we do have a very, very potent Mercury in his birth chart. We also don't need me to tell you the potency and power of his second house significations, neither. His bank balance, his ability to attract a hell of a lot of abundance, assets, skills, gifts, and talents. And I think the Mercury in his chart really does play as the trickster archetype because it's in Cancer. Cancer is not helpful to the sign of Mercury. No water sign is, because Mercury does struggle a little bit when it comes to communication. You try and talk underwater, you're not going to be understood very well. Cancer is a planet of feelings and emotions. Uh, it's hard to describe those things, right? So technically, Mercury is said to be mute. And so Jordan Peterson will go on and talks about the positive elements of his mercurial personality as well as the achievements. But then he also goes on to talk about his, while he's open and curious, which will lead to the entrepreneurialness and the ability to change and to be plastic, the plasticity, the ability to change. He'll also talk about the fact that the sense of humor that Donald Trump has, the words that he has are very impolite and gruff. Um, I actually thought it was hilarious, and I forgot that this was the case. But Donald Trump has a published works of his tweets from, I don't know, back from 2009 to whenever he got banned from Twitter. So he gets banned from Twitter and then has a book of all his published tweets. Um, Pretty funny, very mercurial nonetheless. So very raw, very off the cuff, very sort of in the moment. And you have to sort of be open, have a natural curiosity to be able to do that. Also, remember that Cancer is a reactive sign. It's not necessarily responsive. It reacts. It reacts to emotional situations. That's what the mother archetype does for her baby. She's the reactor. She's going to react to changes in that emotional environment. So he talks about his impoliteness, his sense of humor, which is something that is not present in dictators. So there's a lot of accusations that because of his impoliteness, because of his extreme extroversion and assertiveness, therefore he must be a narcissistic dictator. And yes, his assessment does say he does have those qualities to him around narcissism. There is that potentiality for that, and in reality, we all have a level of it. But it's very strongly offset by he says, a very open and compassionate heart. And because he is so open and he's so compassionate, the Cancer side of it makes him gruff and impolite. And that's the exoskeleton of the Cancer, right? I'm a Cancerian, have the sun in Cancer, so I'm a bit crispy on the outside at first. And that's exactly how Trump presents as well. Um, I'm just trying to think what else I wanted to say about Mercury. So many things. So he has an openness, but his agreeableness is not polite. His manners are not very good. And that's also what can help make him likable. He can be, as I said, the garbage truck driver, but also um, make impact in the higher levels of power, prestige, celebrity, and all of that. Jordan Peterson used an interesting term, and he, whom of himself is very mercurial too. He said that uh, most people who are powerful and narcissistic will kiss up but kick down, and that Trump doesn't do that, which I found very interesting statement. Like he will give equal attention to, you know, a garbage truck collector as he would the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And Mercury in the birth chart is also an evening star. So it rises after the sun and it's transforming, it's going into the phase where it will transition into an evening star. And so a planet that is in the occidental phase or the um, evening phase will naturally lean towards other people. When we're talking Mercury, there's going to be a curiosity. There's going to be questions. There's going to be listening. There's going to be getting data, extracting data from other people. Remember, Mercury houses the ruler of his ascendant, and which is the sun, which is also his identity as well. So he's very driven mercurially. He's very driven by ideas, not aesthetics, as Jordan Peterson said. And everyone, from all accounts and purposes, often say that he's very interested in other people, and he makes you feel very important if you're in his presence, that he's very compassionate, he's a good listener, all of those things that we would expect from Cancer placements. He's got probably more potent Cancer placements than what he has the Gemini, because the node is not a planet and Uranus we can't see. Also, these Cancer planets also rule an angle. Okay, so we've got relationships, whether that's marriage, whether that's his, open enemies in politics, whether that's domestic or international, is also placed in the sign of Cancer. So naturally, Trump has this predisposition for perhaps home and hearth, home and safety, security, and trying to establish that through other people and partners in other places of the world. Um, he's often, Jordan Peterson describes him as that compassion and conscientious. It's Saturn here. There's going to be work ethic there. He also goes on and talks about his children and his family life and how there's just no scandal there. There's no scandal with family. There's no scandal with his children. And despite their prestige and wealth, they all seem to be very level-headed and kind of got it together. And so the ruler of his fourth house is Mars, which is on the ascendant. So there is this sort of vested interest for him, that home and family and him are sort of one and the same thing. Um, when we think about his children as such, which Jordan Peterson sort of talked, children and family life go hand in hand. We are looking to Jupiter. So Jupiter is the ruler of the fifth house of children. And yes, the moon and the south node is there, but the ruler will talk loudly. The ruler is the ultimate, it was the landlord of the house. It has the final say in things. And so Jupiter here is in Libra, which has no special dignity there. We've got a benefic planet ruled by a benefic sign, quite nice, and it's about to station there, as does happen when Jupiter trines the sun. And anyone that has a Jupiter Sun trine is often going to be quite open and generous and good-hearted. It's a really great aspect to have in the birth chart. So what we could see here with Jupiter, it's at 17 degrees of Libra. And so Jupiter is within its own terms, the Egyptian terms or the bounds. So that gives Jupiter a little bit of extra strength, a little bit of extra potency, and a little bit of extra power there as well. So that makes those children perhaps a little bit more well suited, well grounded, in the sense that when a planet is in its own terms, it's got just a little bit of extra special dignity there. I won't go into explaining that too much. Now, Jupiter is the ruler there. And we also got the South Node and the Moon. Now, this is a little bit of a sense of to look at that as an individual aspect, that there's maybe a bit of loss, or there's that pouring of energy into things, the pouring out, the loss, or the letting go. When I see the moon and the South Node signature in someone's chart, it triggers me to think of the cigarettes and coffee type of aspect where um, they might have a cigarette and a coffee for breakfast and then don't eat till dinner time. They kind of almost ignore the hungers of the body. And obviously, we know that Donald Trump doesn't smoke or drink, but he runs such a tight schedule. He's such a workaholic and a work ethic, the creative endeavors that he's done. So he would naturally probably pour, when he's with his kids, they have his full attention, or grandkids as well, as he's got now. Very interested, very curious, and very interested, and what's the word I'm looking for here? Invested into his children. We also see that the ruler of the fourth is conjoined the ascendant. So there's that tightness, there's that the family kind of got it together. This idea that Jordan Peterson often talks about is, make your bed in the morning ethos. And he goes on to say that with Trump's family, there's no scandals, next to no scandals, um, no dramas with the children. There's, the idea of where there's smoke, there's fire, but there's not that in this situation. And there's just no problems with the family. Um, and then he says that can be extrapolated into the sense of no war. I mean, there's no problems at home. There's no wars when he was the president. And so when there's the absence of problems, there's almost no, that can sometimes be a problem in itself. Particularly if you're running a country, you need problems to make yourself be important. Interesting, isn't it, when you think about it like that? So then he goes on more and more about the idea of saying that in order to predict to predict the future, you need to look at the personality as well as the situational setup. And we've had that already with Donald Trump. I will leave that for you to look at if you want to watch the video. But in terms of astrology, when we're talking about, having no war when he was the president, the development of the Abraham Accords, which are still in effect, by the way, obviously would naturally need to be written at this point, but an unfathomable achievement by all stretches of the imagination. So the ruler of the seventh, which is, his open enemies or opponents, is in the 12th house and in Cancer. Now, Saturn in Cancer, positioned at, what is that, 23 degrees, is within the terms of Jupiter. So we do have it's in Jupiter's terms, which is exalted in Cancer, right? And we also have a bit of a wide, it's, not very tight, but it's tight enough. We also have a square to the two planets. So not even factoring in terms or Egyptian terms or bounds, if that's a level of astrology you don't have yet. If you think about it, um, the ruler of his seventh is Saturn in Cancer. And we've got Saturn loves to be in Libra, Jupiter loves to be in Cancer. So we've got this reception, this mutual reception by aspect between the ruler of the seventh house and also, funnily enough, the ruler of children. Now, it was his son-in-law, uh, one of his daughter, I think he said he got one daughter, maybe, I'm not sure. Um, his his daughter and her husband were very instrumental in helping getting some of the peace agreements in the Middle East coming together. So, we've got ultimately Jupiter in Libra, Saturn in Cancer, co-present with Venus, who is the ruler of his midheaven. Um, so we've got, other people, children, midheaven, making some really sweet connections here. Now, there's a rule in astrology that if a planet is within 3 degrees of the midheaven from the 12th house, the 8th house, I also personally extend it to the 6th, it therefore kind of comes out of the condition of being in the 12th and it rises up and gets elevated. So Venus is very, very supportive for his career. Venus, we don't naturally see Donald Trump as a Venusian type. Obviously, the Mars is very dominant there. Underneath the surface, remember, Venus is in Cancer. Um, so it's a little bit hidden. It's a little bit hidden from view. It's something he doesn't show very much. But I think as time goes on, we will probably see more and more of that element of him come to light. It was quite possible as well. Jordan Peterson also goes on to say that even friends, acquaintances, whomever, even if they're diametrically politically um, uh, opposed to him at that level, they still always compliment him on his care, his compassion, his hospitality. Another point that Jordan Peterson made was that even though he's interested more in ideas than aesthetics, he's also had a very close relationship for a long time with celebrities and the arts as such, which is not something that you commonly see in Republican politics. Again, that's an element of that Venus ruled midheaven and Venus being in aspect to the midheaven itself within 3 degrees and pulling that out. So a lot of these Cancer placements, because they're in the 12th house, we don't see them as obviously as what we do with that Mars on the ascendant and the Sun, Uranus, and North Node. That being said, though, um, Jordan Peterson talks about Donald Trump as being very assertive and very impolite. And that can be very helpful when you are dealing with potential open enemies in politics, either domestically or internationally, who are also who also reside technically in the house of secret enemies. So there's that sort of watch your back type of dynamic there, which we could definitely see in a configuration like that. Now, um, so when we think about that dynamic, that someone who is your open enemy or perhaps even an ally could also conspire against you, this could be where that Mars on the ascendant, extroverted, assertive, relentless, could be really, really helpful. So even though he's got this he's got this openness about him with all of that Mercury, thinks outside the box, which is certainly, mercurial coming into visibility, coupled with the Sun, North Node, and Uranus. Mars on the ascendant, very, very instinctual. And those dynamics combined can really help you think like your enemy, which is why I personally think he's done so well on the international stage. I mean, obviously I'm Australian. I don't pay a great deal of attention but just from the what I've witnessed. And he seems to know how to level up to other dictators. I'll give you an example. If you've seen him shake hands with Putin, have you seen him the way he pulls Putin's hand close to him? It's like a show of dominance. Um, in Saudi Arabia, you're banned to touch the crown prince. He touched him. Again, that show of dominance. And he also walked ahead of the Queen at one time, which was quite controversial. That's going back a little while now, and you're not meant to do that. And I think he might have even put his hand around her. So he's going to be dominant when he's playing with the top players. And that's probably what is required when you have open enemies who can also be behind your back or secret enemies. Um, so when we think about Mars in his birth chart, which is a very dominant feature physically and his interactions, we've also got the fixed star Regulus there, which is another dynamic which I won't go into. One thing that's really important when we're talking about planets, you've got to think about the planet. What is the planet going to do? Planet's going to planet is something I teach my students, and that is Mars can only be Mars. However, in this part of Mars's synodic cycle, Mars is the analogy for that would be an old warrior who's seen many battles, and it's a bit Mr. Miyagi. The best way to win a fight is not to be in one. And we could look at that Mars at face value and just think, yeah, dominant, assertive, aggressive, all this thing. But its position in the synodic cycle is a little bit akin to a very late lunation phase. Let's just say, sort of the waxing crescent or waning crescent, I should say. So, just for your knowledge, in case you don't know, the sun will catch up to Mars and it will eventually conjoin, starting a new synodic cycle with Mars for 2 years. So, Mars is at the end of its 2 year cycle now. So, it is very much the old general of the army who's seen many battles and knows what's required in order to avoid them. Again, case in point, his presidency, no wars, and of course the Abraham Accords. So, um, hopefully you found that interesting. I think there's so many more things I could say, but I don't want to get too long in the tooth and boring with all the information. In the video, which is on YouTube, on Jordan Peterson's channel, of course, he also goes on to talk about the other people who've come on board with him. Was that Trump, Musk, Tulsi Gibbard, I think her name is, Vivek. Um, we've got Vance and RFK. So he goes on and talks about their personalities, not to the same extent as Donald Trump, but that's also very interesting too. Perhaps we could look at that stuff for another video. So I do hope that this has helped you not only see maybe Donald Trump from a new perspective, a new astrological perspective, but also helped you to look at some different astrological technique, which you may not have yet seen before. It's November now, so my Golden Circle Club has just it's all the material for the month of November is there. So if you do want to have a look at the astrology for the month of November, we do have two extremely big lunations, new moon in Scorpio and a full moon conjoined Uranus. It's going to be big. So if you would like to explore the month of November, learn more astrology as you go, there is a link to the Golden Circle Club in the description box below. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Happy 200, happy 4,000, and here's to many more episodes and subscribers. So until next time, I hope you have a wonderful new moon in Scorpio.